So welcome to the James Show. I'm your host, James Parker, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. The Tesla hissy fits continued over the weekend, and there were some big ones that were here in town. And when I say big, I think more people showed up at this South Lake Tesla than at the James Show meetup last Tuesday. So you might hear a little bit of jealousy here. I know we're not as well funded and organized. We didn't get any of that Soros money. we don't have a bunch of Reddit groups trying to throw it together. But Carlos Tercios, isn't he with, not Texas Scorecard, what's the other one, Dallas Express? He was up there getting some video of these fine people protesting the Tesla dealership just up the road here in South Lake. And he noticed at 12 o'clock, it was almost like a bell went off. At high noon, a bunch of people just put their signs down and started walking off like it was scheduled. Yeah, so we're going to be there from 9 until noon. And a lot of people found that suspicious. So he took the video and he put it online. It's like, look, it's almost as if like their shift is over, or, like the workday is closed, or like the store is closed, or like the game is over. And I'll be damned, there were other people from other towns at other Tesla dealerships who said they saw the same thing. A bunch of people just walked off at noon. And look, I'm not saying everyone that went to a Tesla protest is paid. I'm sure most of them are not. But this does betray some level of organization, and somewhere, someone in the hierarchy, someone's getting paid, because you don't just magically have 12 different protests all start and end at the same time. And then there were other things that were showing up. If you were not perennially online like I was this weekend, some people were getting pictures of scripts that the chanters were using. Like, how do they all know the same chants? How do they all know that song? How do they all know what's coming next? Well, a lot of them had a script. We'll compare and contrast that with different places. Did they all have the same script? Did they all have different scripts? It's kind of weird that more than one place had a script at all. But I think the real lesson here from the Tesla hissy fits are really just the prime example that you've had in your entire life of how biased and really just dishonest the media is on a daily basis. And I don't just say that to complain media's bad. But the hypothesis here, I think the lesson learned is that if the media was honest, this country would change dramatically. Because what makes this Tesla situation, and really Elon Musk by proxy, but what makes this such a key social experiment is that both Elon Musk and Tesla have been perceived to be on Team Blue for their entire public life until, 2-3 years ago, whenever he bought Twitter? When Elon was on Team Blue, there wasn't angry Republicans setting Teslas on fire, vandalizing them, burning down charging stations, crowding dealerships, flooding them with protesters, forcing them to shut down and not do business on the weekend. That just didn't happen. Because I hear people making the connection. Well, look, when the Team Red people were protesting Bud Light, they didn't go damage other people's Bud Lights or set trucks on fire. We don't even have to come up with a metaphor or a simile. We have Tesla being perceived as both Team Blue and Team Red. When were they being set on fire? Exactly. More anti-Tesla terrorism happened this weekend by Team Blue than by their entire existence by Team Red. Now, how is that an indictment of the media? Well, because all of these vandals that are doing all these things, all the scratchers, all the flooders, all the protesters, all the spray painters, all the arsonists, they were around when the media was telling them Elon was good, Tesla was good. But now these same people are whipped into a tornado of hate. And Elon didn't change. Tesla didn't change. The media coverage of him changed. So before Elon supported Trump and spoke out against wokeism, was he frequently called a Nazi? Now, look, I'm sure, let me be a little deferential here. I'm sure there's below average intelligence people on Team Red and Team Blue. I'm pretty sure there's plenty of people on both sides that aren't the sharpest of critical thinkers and have a tendency to believe whatever they see on TV or their preferred media. The difference is, though, we, and by we I mean, Team Red media like Fox News or Talk Radio or The James Show, we didn't tell our audiences that Elon was a Nazi when he was our perceived political opposition. Now, enough with the deference. Give yourself credit. Team Red followers, certainly more civilized than Team Blue. Less violence, less fires, less property damage. But the question we need to ask ourselves is, what would the landscape look like if Team Blue media was honest? Because if they were honest, would there be Tesla fires on cars and dealerships and charging stations right now? If the media is honest, you got to think no. You got to think there wouldn't be as many protests, period. There wouldn't be all these protests about deportations. There wouldn't be all these protests about Israel. I'm not saying there wouldn't be any, but it would be significantly smaller. All these people that weren't whipped up before that are now whipped up, they wouldn't be whipped up. There probably wouldn't even be a noticeable Antifa, if any. But if the media was honest, here's the other thing. They would be condemning all the domestic terrorism that happened this weekend. Dare I say systemic terrorism? They would be tracking down and doxing the people who organize these domestic terror attacks. They would be condemning them as anti-American, anti-free speech, anti-Western civilization, barbarians. And they would be demanding that law enforcement pursue the organizers of these events for funding terrorist activities, because that's exactly what they did. Remember how there have been groups all over the country, especially since 9/11, who've caught charges right in the face for funding terrorism, Holy Land or whomever else? These people who organized what happened this weekend, a lot of them deserve to be treated no different. Let's stop in and have a chat with the legal eagle on the James Show. It's the great Jeremy Rosenthal, TexasDefenseFirm.com. Welcome back, sir.
James, how are you?
Well, I got a couple of legal questions for you, my lawyer. So let's start off with the Tesla hissy fits that were happening over the weekend. And I say hissy fits because I don't want to be sensational. I don't want to be hyperbolic. I don't want to say it was Tesla domestic terrorism. But in some of these instances, it really does meet the definition of terrorism, where it's an act of intimidation or violence to further a political cause, usually on civilian targets. So my question for you, though, is legally speaking, does this count as domestic terrorism? Because if so, then the organizers, wouldn't they be funding domestic terrorism, or can't they catch some sort of terrorism charges? I really don't know, so I'm just kind of asking a very vague setup for you there, Jeremy.
That's okay. The legal system is designed to take that which is vague and make it even more vague and unintelligible. So, yeah, look, and you kind of already have hit the nail on the head. I mean, let's look at the degree and scope of what domestic terrorism is or is not. And in terms of Tesla, right, if you're attacking infrastructure, if you're inciting some kind of greater political fear, then I think there's a really good argument that that's terrorism. And it also, of course, goes hand in hand with what's the damage that is done, right? Spitting on a car, keying on a car. I don't know a whole lot of people that are going to be in support of charging that with domestic terrorism.
Myself included. Exactly. And that's kind of why I am vague about this. And I'm not calling it the Tesla terror attacks. It's more of just a hissy fit. Because, yeah, a spit means nothing. But setting a charging station on fire or a whole row of Teslas on fire, I just don't know where to legally draw that boundary. How do you send those guys on up the river on terrorism charges without catching these little guys?
Well, I mean, it is. We've talked, I think, in the past about the definition of obscenity, Miller versus California. Yes, you know it when you see it. It's a judgment call because a lot of these things could legally meet the definition of terrorism. But you're right. At some point, it just makes no sense. Now, if we're organizing a massive cyber attack against Tesla computers, if we're organizing something that's even greater, then yes. And even if you were a passive participant, right, if you're helping organize or fund or do something like that, I mean, if the shoe fits, then yes, I think you're right.
Well, we have also, you don't even have to participate in the activity for you to get rolled up on some charges for funding or supporting or aiding and abetting. There's some laws against, terrorism from that angle as well. We've even seen some institutions here in the DFW area catch charges on that, although I'm not really 100% on how it turned out, so I don't want to say any names, but is there some connection there, like for funding or supporting terrorism?
I mean, you got to link it, and you got to show the math. That's going to be the challenge with anything like that. And I mean, the downstream folks who are committing the acts, and the upstream folks who may, if there's any dollars that are connecting that, you got to show a little bit more than just, well, this is where the money came from, right? You got to show that there was a little knowledge, and that's where I think a lot of these things die. Although in theory, again, I think you're right.
Okay, so my next legal question for you, Jeremy Rosenthal, TexasDefenseFirm.com. I don't know if you probably heard about this because you're in a lawyer circle right now. The idea that Trump could do a third term, because the loophole supposedly is the amendment to the Constitution says you can't get elected to more than 2 terms. But if he ran as J.D. Vance's VP in 2028, J.D. Vance wins, steps down. Could Trump really get a third term?
Okay, so talking theory, right? I mean, the big question is this what everybody wants? But it's fun to kind of map this out and to chart this out, at least from a legal standpoint. The short answer is it is extremely hard to think that he could legally pull off a third term. Again, whether people want that or not is another story. The 12th Amendment, actually, James, says that if you are ineligible to run for president, you cannot run for vice president. So he could not be J.D. Vance's running mate.
Okay.
What would and kind of when I was looking at this problem over the weekend and kind of Xing and Oing it, the only way that I conceivably can see that this could happen. So no person can be elected more than twice. Period. Stop. End of story. It doesn't say consecutively. So Trump is ineligible to be elected again as president of the United States. He would have to, I think, be something like the Speaker of the House, and then which means you got to win the House.
Oh, and then they both step down like in House of Cards.
And then you need 2 people, right? And the only 2 people in the world that I could see doing that for you, for anybody, are Donald and are Don Jr. and Eric. Okay,
you're the first person I heard say that. You're the first person I heard bring up the Speaker of the House loophole. There you go.
Well, and I don't think and guess who else is going to run for it if you try that?
Barack Obama. Yeah, why don't we just hey, if one side's going to burn down the Constitution, might as well have both sides doing it.
You know what? Let's just go for this. So, you know what? Stranger things have happened, but listen, I mean, what happens too is power is a very, very difficult thing to give up. And even if J.D. Vance tells you to your face, I'm going to step down the minute I take office. I mean, even then, he
will he? Yeah.
At the same point, he's going to be like, everybody kind of is laughing at my jokes. I kind of like this. I'm kind of actually digging this. And you know what? I'm thinking I'm going to keep it. So I think any legal way that Trump has got to a third term is extraordinarily tenuous and is something of theory and fun to kind of map out, but I don't see it happening. Yeah.
Here's where my screwball brain, it's powerful. It's just unrefined. I am thinking of the Texas example. Are you familiar with the story of Ma and Pa Ferguson? Pa Ferguson was governor of, you probably know, let me explain to everyone else. Pa Ferguson was governor of Texas a little over 100 years ago. He got caught up in some corruption scandals, and so he got charged with some crimes and convicted and kicked out of office. And so he wasn't allowed to run for office again, so his wife ran for office, Ma and Pa Ferguson. She actually won the election, and then they had the old wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You got 2 governors for the price of 1 deal, which means, Jeremy, could Melania do the same thing?
I don't know that she was born in the U.S. So
that's right. So. Yeah. All right.
Man, you're but you know what, man, you're
trying.
You're thinking, your brain is on here with this.
I'm just wrong. Yeah. You're smart. You're just wrong, Parker. Thank you very much, Jeremy, for being polite about that.
I hadn't thought of Paul Ferguson. I hadn't thought of him, but yeah.
All right. TexasDefenseFirm.com. What y'all got going on up there?
Man, I'm out of the office today. I was not able to accomplish many things growing up. So what I do is I kind of make my children do it, sort of to fulfill that need. So I'm at a golf tournament for my daughter today, where she will achieve my goals that I could never do because I'm thoroughly inadequate. And I've heard that can be bad parenting and backfire on parents. But
I'm doing the same thing, and it's fun in the meantime. It might backfire, but therapy's cheap. Thank you, Jeremy.
All right, thanks, buddy.
All right, I'm going to ask you the same thing. Kind of not through the legal angle, but just you as a voter. Would you support Trump if he tried one of these? If he tried to run for a third term? If he tried to either be Speaker of the House or a J.D. Vance running mate or trying to get Melania or whatever the case is? A lot of people are saying no one would ever support that. I don't know. If you're a Trump supporter, would you support Trump if he ran for a third term? Part of the narrative that's already formulating around this is the people who just hate Trump all day, every day, like bloodthirsty monsters for a living, saying, see, this is just evidence that he wants to be a dictator and he wants to be a king and might as well just call himself Augustus Caesar after this. But let's go ahead and talk about this move itself. Because, of course, it violates the spirit of the law. The spirit of the law was shattered by FDR. And there wasn't really for the longest time a law. George Washington just did 2 terms, stepped down, and that was used as the model until not even 100 years ago. FDR went for 4 terms. And it was only after that when the amendment with the term limits was actually put into the Constitution. And so now it limits you. You can only be elected to 2 terms. Now, one of the cases that was, we ran it by Jeremy Rosenthal in the last segment. If you missed it, you want to go check the podcast because he said this smarter than I did. The idea that he could be J.D. Vance's running mate in 2028, and then after they win, J.D. Vance can resign and he slide over. That appears to be contravened by the 12th Amendment that says if you're not eligible to run for president, you can't be vice president as well. So maybe we can put that to bed. I was trying to bring up the idea of the Ma and Pa Ferguson switch, where it's a husband and wife proxy. But he pointed out rightfully, well, Melania is not a naturally born citizen, so that one's kind of out too. But let's say we found some sort of legal framework or some sort of loophole. I don't think you would support him. I think some people would. I don't think you would. And by you, you're paying attention every day. You were probably listening to WBAP long before Donald Trump came around. You'll be listening to WBAP long afterwards, and you've held the same beliefs. And he is not the guy that you're voting for. You're voting for principles. He's just the tip of the spear of that movement right now. So your loyalty is not to Donald Trump. Your loyalty is to your principles. And I think most voters would agree with that on Team Red and Team Blue. So I don't even think most people would support him that support him now if he tried to run for a 3rd term. They'd be like, listen, bro, we love you. How about we just support J.D. Vance and, I don't know, maybe you can be in his cabinet. Maybe you can be Secretary of State. Also, keep in mind the Jeremy Rosenthal idea of him becoming Speaker of the House and then sliding up 2 spots because that's 3rd in line. But I don't think we're going to actually have to deal with this in the real world. This is just a fun conversation to have. But let's go ahead and have the conversation. If Trump was trying to get in the White House for a 3rd term, would you support him? 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. Now, it's without the theory. Let's go ahead and get the brass tacks in the real world. I really don't think he wants to. I don't think he wants to run for a 3rd term. I bet you there's a lot of people out there who would like to see him run for a 3rd term. There may be some truth to the fact that people are like, hey, this is how you could do it. But there's a couple of reasons why I don't think he would want to. Number one, he's probably old. He's probably tired. Let's see how much he likes it after the end of this 2nd term. I get it. The pattern in history is that for people, once they gain really high levels of power, they have a tendency to want to hold on to it for life. And then that tendency turns around. Usually they want to pass it down to their son. But I also think he's just saying this to flip out the media. I think he's a great manipulator is probably a good word. It just sounds so negative. But he's good at controlling the media. He's good. If you want to distract your dog, you go, whoa, what's that? Or you can throw a tennis ball over there and he'll go chase it. I think that's what he's doing. I think he's throwing a tennis ball so they can go track down all these constitutional experts or these academics or have all these other guys on, and they're talking about what an idiot Trump is for thinking how scary and authoritarian and pretty much Hitler it is. Meanwhile, they're not spending that time criticizing his actual job. They're not spending time criticizing his tariffs or Doge or the markets or any of this other stuff. He's throwing a tennis ball and watch these fools chase it. I bet you he enjoyed the Signal Chat story because the Signal Chat story was just a non-starter going nowhere with no victims. No laws were broken. Nothing was even really unethical. It's just some dude overheard your conversation. It's like someone heard you talking to each other behind the line at Walmart. And I bet you he loved that. And I'll tell you what was hilarious about it. This non-story with no victims and no negative consequences or effect on your life in any way whatsoever. That dominated the Sunday talk shows. Everyone had to talk about it. This is an almost non-story. Someone overheard a conversation. Whoa, close the barn door, shut everything down. We've got a burner in here. But I think he's throwing the tennis ball. I think the media's chasing it. I think it's a fun conversation to have, but I'm not so sure you would support him. Let me squeeze in Steve in Weatherford. Steve, you're on WBAP. Would you support Trump in a 3rd term?
No, sir.
Why not? Did you support him the first two?
Yes, and I've supported him 3 times now. But we need term limits from president all the way down to congressman.
So why do you think he's saying this?
To get the media over here looking at a shiny object to get away from the signal chat thing.
Yeah, and I don't even I wouldn't want him to get off the signal chat thing. You realize every second they spend talking about Trump's third term or signal chat, they're not talking about the actual job he's doing. They're not dislodging him from any of his supporters, putting any ideological ground between anyone. But so I kind of feel that way too. I don't know if he would change his mind if the polls were overwhelming and then we had a constitutional amendment that allowed a third term. I'm not even sure if he would change his mind then. But
he'd be 82, and he is fighting the biggest dragon on the face of the earth right now, what we call deep state. There's not a bigger enemy on the face of the earth than the deep state of the U.S., and he's fighting it tooth and nail. Yeah,
and I imagine after about 12 years cumulative of this, he just wants to go play golf. I mean, I think about how tired I am, and I'm 47. Can't imagine going through what that man's gone through and still wanting to do that job again. Joe in Grapevine, you're on WBAP. Would you support Trump for a third term?
Yes, I would, James. And I'll tell you why. And it all has to do with not just one thing, but multiple issues. As you said, this would be unprecedented. This would be unusual. It's been done before, but it's not the norm. And it can be done if we change things. But as we know, and you one time covered this, and you did an outstanding job. It's been a while back. It was I believe it was you. I could be wrong. And you covered it at one time, the irregularities of the 2020 election. If you would go over that, if you'll recall, when the Capitol was breached, Ted Cruz was fixing to speak about all of the irregularities. What if we now get in there and find, because we have control of everything, and we find out this was coordinated through not only perhaps the Secret Service to some degree, as we know in other areas, but the FBI, the police for the Capitol Police, as well as others that may be involved with this. Recall Dan Bongino. You say, well, he was a talk show host. Well, he's a former, he's a current deputy director of the FBI now. He also had a lot of inside information. What about the backpack bomber?
The pipe bombs.
Dropped all that.
Yeah.
The pipe bomb. Well, James, if we find out that this wasn't just about, was it the Pennsylvania, the irregularities, which was very irregular, and you've gone over this. I wish you would again. But we find out that this involved multiple agencies, multiple different situations. This was coordinated, and to cheat and keep this man, as we know of all the other things that has come out, James, this could be huge. And why did they put that aside when Kamala Harris went to that area, and yet they said nothing about it? And as Dan Bongino had said, he suspected that they used the breach to cover that because they thought that was the plan A. Well, they didn't really expect too much on plan B, but it ended up, and what did we also find out? There were multiple FBI agents trying to entice, trying to encourage these people to do what they did. What if all of this is found out, Chris? I know myself, I thought of that. I was born at night, but not last night. I'm not the most educated man.
Right, Joe, but let me see if I can distill this down a little bit. So you would support Trump for a third term because he was cheated in the 2020 election?
Not just that one thing, but they find out.
The whole January 6th and everything?
Everything. All of it was just all behind the scenes. How would if this?
Yeah,
was
but you don't like break the constitutional norms and amendments or whatever because you had some bad actors in your political opposition. You still follow the rules. You just send those people to whoever did the chicanery or anything illegal, prosecute them, give them their due process, send them to jail. You don't make a third term president.
No, but they can do it through Congress. They can bring that in.
They can repeal the amendments or whatever, because then that would have to be ratified and go through 3/4 of the state houses. I don't think we could get an amendment through, but if we could, I'm still not comfortable doing it. I'm still not, just to stick it in the eye of people who behave poorly, because we do have elections that we are pretty sure were stolen in the past. And when we go back and relitigate those, we don't say, well, Harry Truman needs to be back in office. I mean, it's the opposite. He stole it from, I forgot who the other Democrat was running in 44 against FDR. But there was like an election at the Democrat National Convention where they were counting the votes and Truman was losing. And so the lights went out and someone hit the fire alarm. And so they had to stop. And the next day when they recounted the votes, Harry Truman won. We all kind of agree, like, ha ha, that's funny. We all kind of agree that Joe Kennedy strong-armed some of his political and mafia friends and union friends and stole Illinois. And we all kind of look back and ha ha ha. I think that's all we're going to get out of, when 2020 is finally uncovered, because, Joe Biden's going to be gone by then. Donald Trump's probably not going to want to be president by then. And I don't think you break constitutional norms just to stick it in the eye of people who cheated you. You got cheated. I'll give you that. But I don't think I don't think that fixes it.
James, if I may say, I would support him, yes. But I don't think that he would want or do which I didn't get to, the entire time. He could step down. But what this would do was bring to light, instead of sweeping it under the rug, instead of allowing them to ignore it, what it would do, just like he's done in other areas, it would bring it to light. And we need to know this. Look what we're finding out, that, 5 million people that were knowingly illegal were given Social Security numbers.
Right.
About 1 million.
No need to start a new topic. All right, Joe. I know what you're saying. I want to take another call. But, man, he's so much more hopeful than I am, because I'm all thinking that this is going to be like, I'd mentioned JFK. Here it is, 50, 60 years later. We still don't have the full skinny. We finally got the paperwork on JFK. I figure this is about the time we'll find out for sure the 2020 election truth. But, man, what an optimistic dude. Lloyd and McKinney, you're next up on WBAP. Would you support Trump for a third term?
Hey, yeah, I would support it, but I would caution everybody, because setting that precedent would open the door to possibly some bad things. Like, we don't want a Biden third term. The next Biden to run 3 times.
Yeah. Well, we also have the dangerous thing throughout history is anytime, there has been term limits or there has been a cap on power, not to overuse the Rome comparison, but whenever those caps get taken off, they're never putting back on. So we're in a weird homeostasis right now where FDR broke that trend almost 100 years ago. And we came and we actually tried to be one of maybe the first society that once term limits were removed to put them back on. And so I don't know if that's just like a lid on a boiling pot that's shaking right now and is about to get blown off, or if it's actually going to stick this time around, because that would be breaking a classic historical precedent if we can reinstitute term limits and have it stick. This is Phil and Melissa. You're on WBAP. What do you think about Trump and maybe attempting a third term?
Well, I don't support a third term for anybody, because, Barack Obama is going to come right out and go, well, I can run for a third term. And he's not going to wait until Trump has his third term. It's going to be the boxing match of the century.
Well, half of our country, or maybe 20% of our country, their head's just going to explode if that happens. Number one, they were so pro-Obama, and they are so anti-Trump that if you mix these two together, it'd be like matter and antimatter colliding and just creating a brief black hole that we'd all sink into.
I think so.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, Phil. I've seen a lot of that in the comments. Oh, yeah, well, if he runs again, we're going to run Obama, and he's going to get the floor wiped with him. I don't know, man. I don't know if he would lose to Obama. I don't want to see how angry these people can get. How many cars have to be set on fire? James in Flower Mound, you're on WBAP. Would you support a Trump third term?
I wouldn't. I've voted for him 3 times already. I think a 4th time would just feel weird. Not that it's even possible, but, he's not going to be around forever regardless. And I think the party really needs to focus in on who's going to kind of take it from here. And I think J.D. Vance is a great option for that, but it's time to start investing in some of the future leaders of the party.
Yeah, I also wonder, why does this happen over and over through history? For other democracies or republics, it's just some Julius Caesar or Augustus shows up and they're like, yeah, let's just let him run the place for life. Don't the people at the time Know that that's not a good thing. This is going to be the inflection point of history that's not going to be looked kindly upon by future generations.
And I think that's exactly why he won the first time, because if you remember, the front runners were going to be Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton.
Oh, God.
And the idea of going back and forth between Clintons and Bushes, I think that made everyone disgusted, and I think that generated a lot of the support that he had, because everyone was just so fed up with just those two families being involved in some way or another.
So why do you think he's saying this?
On one hand, he is his own worst enemy in many cases, and I think he just, says things a lot of times, and I don't think it's great for him. Like, I don't like the idea of him joking about the Canada thing. I know he's kind of poking liberals, but at a certain point, like the joke's, not funny anymore. You do have to move on, and we do have to get serious about who's running the show next.
Yeah, and I think the good part about your warning there is if you do make this all about Trump, then when Trump is gone, the movement dies. And what do? Just give it all back? We just recreate the Department of Education and USAID and all that. So, I hear a lot of people that are saying the same thing you are, James. Is anyone disagreeing? Thank you, over in Flower Mound, other James. Does anyone disagree? Does anyone think, no, Trump, if he ran for a third term, while that doesn't fit with the spirit of the law, that would be what's best for the country, so I'd support him? Is there anyone like that out there? Because everyone else on hold doesn't even think, doesn't support him. Yeah, 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. Let me hear from someone who would support it. Because so far nobody. We already talked to like 4 people here. So look, and I'm still working under the assumption that he's throwing a tennis ball to the media. I do secretly have concerns that the intoxicating effect of power, especially being the most powerful guy the world has ever known, I don't think any human being is immune to that temptation. But I can't crawl inside the guy's head. I don't think he's really a dictator in hiding. He already had a chance to put his foot down, and he voluntarily gave up office after one of the shadiest elections of your lifetime in 2020. When 2021 came down in January 2021, he stepped down, didn't he? Well, that's not what a dedicated dictator would do. He also stepped down and didn't hand off the keys to one of his progenies, because you saw Putin do that. Once Putin seized power back in the late 90s, he did pretend to step down after the term limit thing happened, and they let Medvedev be the president for a while. And then after that, he was like, I guess if the Russian people really want me, I'll come back for another term. So we didn't even see that happen in 2021. So we've had a chance for him to repeat that pattern in history that you've seen so many other people break, and he didn't. He didn't. Give him credit there. So if he really is just throwing a tennis ball to get the media distracted so they don't deal with him while he's actually taking care of real business, brilliant move. Brilliant move. If he's saying this because he really wants to be a dictator, terrible move. The truth is going to be somewhere in between. But on the spectrum, I hope it's more toward the tennis ball than the Augustus Caesar side of that spectrum. 800-288-9227. If you want to chime in. Although, I think the one big negative, what James was bringing up, or was that Phil, that said he's his own worst enemy? A lot of people bristle at that. But I think that's a good criticism if you look at the idea of no one can do as much damage to Trump as Trump does. Keith, this is Keith in Fort Worth. You're on WBAP. Would you support Trump for a third term?
Oh, definitely. The number one reason is because 4 years, if he gets out and a Democrat gets in, a Democrat's going to get rid of everything he did, just like how Biden did. So if he runs for a third term and wins, his policies he has in place, he's just will stay in place. And his policies are making America better as a financial and just everything better. All
right, but what could he do with a third term that he can't do with the last 3 years of this first term? He can solidify his policies over the next 3 years. It's not like he's going to be out of office on Friday.
Right, but he can keep those policies in place.
Do you feel odd? Does it make you feel uneasy that you're breaking the precedent set by George Washington and then codified by the amendment?
A little bit, but Trump is doing what we need to. Trump is doing right by the country.
All right,
he's making our country better, but it's I think he won't be around forever. I get that, but I think if Obama ran against him, or even Michael Obama, he'll wipe the floor with him.
I see what you did there. You're very funny. That's Keith. Details on the junior high viral fight coming up next on the James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP now on FM at 93.3.